The night consciousness awakens. Welcome, pause for a moment. Close your eyes and think about the last time you woke up feeling truly rested, genuinely refreshed, as if your entire being had been restored by something invisible yet profoundly powerful. That sensation you're remembering right now, that feeling of completeness, is not random. It is the result of one of the most fascinating biological processes happening inside your body every single night, while you drift into silence. But here's something that might surprise you. Almost everything you've been told about sleep might be incomplete, or perhaps even misleading. For decades, we've accepted certain truths about sleep as absolute certainties. We've told ourselves that 8 hours is the magic number, that we must lie completely still, that we need to avoid screens at all costs, that a nightcap helps us rest better. These ideas have become so embedded in our culture, so repeated in health articles and wellness magazines, that we rarely question them anymore. They feel like facts. They sound like science. Yet when we look at what modern neuroscience actually reveals about how we sleep, we discover something quite different. We discover that the reality of sleep is far more nuanced, far more individual, and far more fascinating than the myths we've inherited. Before we begin this journey through the actual science of sleep, I invite you to subscribe to the Relaxing Science channel. Give this video a like and share your location and the time of day below. I'd love to know where you are in the world right now and whether you're watching this during the day or as you prepare for rest. Your perspective matters, and your engagement helps us create more content that explores the intersection of science and tranquility. Tonight, over the next moments together, we're going to explore 5 profound myths about sleep that science has thoroughly debunked. But more importantly, we're going to discover what actually matters for your rest. We're going to move beyond the oversimplified rules and enter the world of personalized sleep science, where your individual biology takes precedence over universal prescriptions. We're going to understand why your neighbor might thrive on 6 hours while you genuinely need 9. We're going to learn why the position you sleep in might be less important than you think, and why some of the things you've been avoiding might not be the real culprits behind your restless nights. This exploration is not meant to overwhelm you with information. Rather, it's designed to calm your mind by replacing anxiety-inducing myths with evidence-based understanding. When you understand how something truly works, when you grasp the actual mechanisms behind it, fear diminishes. Confusion transforms into clarity, and clarity creates the mental space where genuine rest can flourish. The human brain during sleep is not passive. It's not simply switching off like a computer entering standby mode. Instead, your brain becomes a kind of orchestral conductor, managing dozens of complex processes simultaneously. Your neurons are firing, your memories are being consolidated, your emotions are being processed, your body is being repaired at a cellular level. Consciousness doesn't disappear during sleep. It transforms. It enters different modes of awareness, different ways of processing reality. And these different modes require different conditions than the ones we've traditionally assumed were universal. Sleep is not a single state, but rather a collection of states. Throughout the night, you cycle through different stages, each with its own unique characteristics, its own unique importance. Some of these stages are filled with rapid eye movement and vivid dreams. Others are deep and still, where your body performs its most intense restoration. These stages don't happen in the same way for everyone. Their duration, their intensity, their sequence, all of these vary based on your individual physiology, your age, your genetics, your lifestyle, and countless other factors that make you uniquely you. What we're about to explore together is not a prescription. It's not a rigid set of rules that you must follow to be a good sleeper. Rather, think of this as a map that helps you understand your own territory, your own body, your own needs. Once you understand the actual science, you can make informed decisions about your own sleep. You can experiment with what works for you. You can let go of the guilt and anxiety that comes from not fitting into a one-size-fits-all model that was never designed to fit everyone in the first place. The journey we're beginning now is one of discovery and ultimately of self-compassion. Many people struggle with sleep, not because their bodies are broken, but because they're trying to force themselves into a mold that doesn't match their individual design. They're following rules that might work beautifully for someone else, but feel constraining and impossible for them. This creates a vicious cycle. Anxiety about sleep disrupts sleep further, which increases anxiety, which disrupts sleep even more. By the time we finish exploring these myths together, you'll have the knowledge to break that cycle. You'll understand that the variations in how humans sleep are not failures or defects. They're features. They're evidence of our remarkable biological diversity. So settle in. Find yourself in a comfortable position, whether you're lying down or sitting peacefully. Let your shoulders relax. Feel the support beneath you. Know that the next hour or so is dedicated entirely to you, to your understanding, to your rest. There's nowhere else you need to be. There's nothing else you need to accomplish right now, except to be here, present, absorbing this knowledge that will eventually help you sleep better. Not by fighting your nature, but by understanding it. The night consciousness is awakening within you. Not just your awareness of sleep, but your awareness of yourself as a sleeping being, as a biological entity with rhythms and patterns and needs that are uniquely yours. This awakening is the first step toward genuine rest, because once you understand yourself, once you know what your body actually needs rather than what you think it should need, sleep becomes easier. It becomes more natural. It becomes less something you have to fight for, and more something you can surrender into. The 8-hour illusion. There it is, the number that has haunted our collective consciousness for generations. 8 hours. 8 hours of sleep, we're told, is what every healthy adult needs. 8 hours is the magic threshold. Get less than 8, and you're sleep deprived. Get more than 8, and you're being lazy, or there's something medically wrong with you. This figure has become so universal, so deeply embedded in our health consciousness, that most people feel guilty if they sleep even slightly less. They set alarms to wake up after 8 hours, even if they're still resting deeply. They feel ashamed if they naturally need 9 or 10. And conversely, those who thrive on 6 or 7 hours feel like they're somehow cheating the system, waiting for the consequences to catch up with them. But here's what the science actually says. The 8-hour rule is a beautiful oversimplification of a much more complex reality. It's not that 8 hours is wrong. For many people, 8 hours is indeed ideal, but for many others, it's not. The variation in human sleep needs is far greater than we typically acknowledge. Some people genuinely function optimally on 6 hours of sleep per night. Others need 9, 10, or even more. This isn't laziness in the latter group, and it's not some kind of superhuman efficiency in the former. It's simply biology, it's genetics, it's individuality. The 8-hour recommendation emerged from research conducted over many decades, research that looked at average sleep duration across populations. When researchers averaged out everyone's sleep needs, they got approximately 8 hours. But averages can be deeply misleading. If you put one person in a room who sleeps 4 hours and another person who sleeps 12 hours, the average is 8. But neither of those individuals actually needs 8 hours. The average doesn't represent either of them. It's a mathematical fiction. Yet we've built an entire culture of sleep advice around this mathematical fiction. What modern sleep science has discovered is that sleep need is distributed across the population like height or intelligence. Some people are naturally short sleepers. Some are naturally long sleepers. Most cluster around the middle, but the edges of the distribution are perfectly healthy. Research has identified specific genetic variations that predispose some people toward needing less sleep. These aren't defects. These aren't signs that something is wrong. They're simply variations in how human brains and bodies are wired. If you carry these genetic variations, your brain genuinely functions well on less sleep. Your cognitive performance is normal. Your health outcomes are normal. You're not running a deficit. You're simply built differently. The problem with the 8-hour rule is that it creates unnecessary anxiety. People who naturally need less sleep feel like they're doing something wrong. They keep trying to sleep longer, forcing themselves to stay in bed even though they're fully awake and rested. This creates frustration. They start worrying that they're not getting enough sleep, and this worry itself can begin to disrupt their sleep quality. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The anxiety about not sleeping enough creates the very sleep disruption they were worried about. Meanwhile, people who naturally need more sleep feel guilty every time they sleep past a certain hour. They feel like they're being indulgent or weak. They might set alarms to wake up earlier, cutting short a sleep cycle that their body genuinely needed, leaving them tired and irritable for the rest of the day. One of the most revealing studies on sleep duration and health outcomes examined mortality rates across different sleep durations. Researchers expected to find that shorter sleepers had worse health outcomes, but what they actually found was more nuanced. Yes, people sleeping very little, around 5 hours or less, showed some increased health risks. And yes, people sleeping extremely much, regularly sleeping more than 9 or 10 hours, sometimes showed associations with certain health conditions. But within the range of roughly 6 to 9 hours, health outcomes were remarkably similar. The relationship between sleep duration and health wasn't a simple linear one where more sleep is always better. Instead, it was more like a sweet spot that varied from person to person. The way to discover your actual sleep need is not to follow a rule, but to listen to your body. This requires a particular kind of attention and honesty with yourself. It means, for a period of time, allowing yourself to sleep without an alarm. Not forever. Most of us have obligations that require us to wake at specific times. But perhaps for a week or two during a vacation or a time when your schedule is flexible, allow yourself to go to bed when you're tired and wake when you naturally wake. Don't force yourself to sleep longer if you're rested. Don't cut sleep short because you think you should. Just observe. What does your body naturally choose? Most people find that when they remove the anxiety and the rules, their sleep settles into a consistent pattern. This pattern is your true sleep need. This is the amount of sleep your individual biology requires. Once you know your actual sleep need, an interesting thing happens. You can stop fighting against your nature. If you genuinely need 7 hours and you're getting 7 hours, you're not sleep deprived no matter what any article tells you. You can stop feeling guilty. You can stop worrying. You can trust your body, and this trust, this acceptance is profoundly relaxing. It removes a layer of anxiety that has been sitting on top of your sleep for perhaps years. You're no longer trying to fit into someone else's template. You're honoring your own design. The 8-hour myth also obscures another important truth. Consistency matters more than duration. Research on sleep and health has found that people who consistently get a stable amount of sleep, whether that's 6, 7, 8, or 9 hours, tend to have better health outcomes than people who vary wildly. One night 6 hours, the next night 10, the next night 7. This variation creates stress on the body. Your circadian rhythms, your biological clock, works best when sleep is predictable. When you know you're going to sleep at 10 and wake at 6, your body begins preparing for this schedule hours in advance. Your temperature drops, your melatonin rises, your digestive system adjusts. But when your sleep schedule is chaotic, your body can never quite prepare. It's always caught off guard. This creates a kind of chronic, low-level stress that accumulates over time. So the real question isn't, am I getting 8 hours? The real question is, am I getting enough sleep for me consistently? This is a much more personal question. It requires self-knowledge rather than adherence to a rule. And it opens up the possibility that you might actually be sleeping just fine, that your sleep might be perfectly adequate, that the anxiety you've been carrying about not sleeping enough might itself be the only real problem with your sleep. The body's internal clock. Deep within your brain, buried in a region called the hypothalamus, sits a tiny structure no larger than a grain of rice. This structure is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it functions as your body's master clock. It is the conductor of your internal orchestra, the timekeeper that orchestrates not just when you sleep and wake, but when you eat, when you produce hormones, when your body temperature rises and falls, when your immune system is most active, when your cognitive performance peaks. This tiny cluster of cells contains approximately 20,000 neurons, and these neurons are constantly measuring light, monitoring circadian time, and broadcasting timing signals throughout your entire body. Your circadian rhythm is not something you choose. It's not a habit you've developed. It's a biological program that's literally written into your cells. Every cell in your body has its own clock, but the master clock in your brain synchronizes all these individual cellular clocks, keeping them running in harmony. This synchronization is essential. Without it, different parts of your body would be operating on different schedules, and the result would be chaos. Your stomach would be trying to digest food while your digestive system is shut down. Your heart would be trying to do intensive work while your muscles are being told to rest. Your brain would be trying to be alert while your body is preparing for sleep. The way this master clock stays synchronized to the actual time of day is through light exposure. Light is the primary signal that tells your body what time it is. When light enters your eyes, special cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells detect it and send signals directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. These cells don't care about the images you're seeing. They ignore colors and shapes and faces. They're only sensitive to light intensity and timing. When you see bright light in the morning, these cells send a signal to your brain that says, essentially, it's morning, time to wake up, time to be alert. Your body responds by reducing melatonin production, increasing cortisol, raising body temperature, and increasing heart rate. These changes don't happen instantly. They're gradual, but they begin immediately upon exposure to morning light. This is why your circadian rhythm is sometimes described as a biological clock. But it's more accurate to think of it as a biological oscillator. It's not like a mechanical clock that keeps time independently. Instead, it's like a pendulum that naturally swings back and forth. But the period of the swing is not exactly 24 hours. For most people, the natural period of this internal oscillation is slightly longer than 24 hours, around 24 hours and 15 minutes. This means that without external time cues, your internal clock would gradually drift later and later each day. You'd go to sleep progressively later, wake up progressively later, until eventually your sleep schedule would flip completely. This actually happens to people in complete isolation from light and time cues. Their internal clocks continue oscillating, but without the synchronizing signal of light, they drift. But in normal life, light keeps your clock synchronized. Every morning, light resets your internal clock to the correct time. This reset is called entrainment. Your circadian rhythm is entrained to the light-dark cycle of your environment. This is why jet lag happens. When you fly across time zones, your internal clock is still entrained to your home time zone, but your external environment is operating on a different time. Your body is telling you it's midnight and time to sleep, but the sun is shining brightly and the local time is noon. This mismatch creates discomfort, disorientation, and sleep disruption. Over several days, your internal clock gradually re-entrains to the new light-dark cycle. But this process takes time. Roughly 1 day per time zone crossed, though some people adjust faster and some slower. This brings us to one of the most important discoveries about individual differences in sleep: chronotypes. A chronotype is your natural inclination toward being a morning person or an evening person. Some people's internal clocks naturally run a bit faster than 24 hours, making them naturally inclined to go to sleep earlier and wake earlier. These are the morning people, sometimes called larks. Other people's internal clocks naturally run a bit slower, making them naturally inclined to go to sleep later and wake later. These are the evening people, sometimes called owls. This isn't a personality trait. It's not something you can change through willpower or habit. It's a biological characteristic, largely determined by genetics. The morning person wakes naturally at 5 or 6 in the morning, feeling alert and energetic. Their body temperature peaks in the late morning. Their cognitive performance is best in the early part of the day. By 9 or 10 at night, they're tired. Their body is signaling that it's time to sleep. For them, going to bed at 10 and waking at 5 or 6 feels natural and easy. But the evening person's internal clock is running on a different schedule. They might not feel tired until midnight or 1 in the morning. They wake naturally at 7 or 8 or 9. Their cognitive performance peaks in the afternoon or evening. For them, going to bed at 10 is fighting against their biology. They're trying to sleep when their body is still in its active phase. They lie awake, frustrated, eventually falling asleep around midnight or later. Then they're forced to wake at 6 or 7 because of work or other obligations, cutting short their sleep when their body still needs more rest. This is where much of the frustration and guilt around sleep comes from. Society tends to be structured around morning person schedules. Work starts at 9, school starts at 8. The world is built for people who naturally wake early. Evening people are seen as lazy, undisciplined, or somehow deficient. But they're not. They're just differently wired. And when evening people are forced to operate on morning person schedules, their performance suffers. Their sleep suffers, their health suffers. There's actually research showing that when evening people are allowed to work on schedules aligned with their natural chronotype, their productivity increases and their well-being improves. But when they're forced into misaligned schedules, they experience chronic circadian misalignment, which creates a kind of perpetual jet lag, even though they're not traveling. The interaction between your individual chronotype and the light-dark cycle of your environment creates your unique sleep-wake pattern. Light is powerful, and it can shift your chronotype somewhat. Getting bright light exposure in the morning advances your clock, making you more of a morning person. Getting light exposure in the evening delays your clock, making you more of an evening person. This is why light therapy can help with seasonal affective disorder and why the timing of light exposure matters so much for sleep quality. But there are limits to how much light can shift your chronotype. You can't turn an extreme evening person into a morning person just through light exposure. You can shift them somewhat, but you're working against their fundamental biological design. Understanding your chronotype is crucial for optimizing your sleep. It's not about fighting your nature, it's about working with it. If you're an evening person and you have the flexibility in your life, structure your schedule around your natural tendencies. Sleep later, wake later. If you don't have that flexibility, at least understand what you're doing to yourself. You're operating in a state of chronic circadian misalignment. You might not be able to change your schedule, but you can be gentler with yourself about the consequences. You can use light exposure strategically to shift your clock as much as possible in the direction you need to go. You can be consistent about your sleep schedule even though it feels unnatural. Consistency helps your body adapt somewhat, even if the schedule isn't perfectly aligned with your chronotype. When darkness becomes your ally, imagine for a moment the world before electric light. For the vast majority of human history, our ancestors lived in a world where darkness came with the sunset and remained until sunrise. There were no streetlights, no house lights, no screens glowing in the darkness. The only light sources were fire and the moon and the stars. This meant that the light-dark cycle was perfectly synchronized with the actual rotation of the Earth. When the sun set, darkness came. When the sun rose, light came. And this rhythm shaped our biology profoundly. Our brains evolved in this context. Our circadian rhythms evolved to respond to this natural light-dark cycle. Our hormones evolved to follow this pattern. Then, in the last 150 years, we invented electric light. And in the last 30 years, we invented screens that emit light continuously. We've essentially created a world where darkness is optional. We can have light whenever we want it, for as long as we want it. This is an extraordinary achievement in many ways. It's extended our productive hours. It's enabled us to work and socialize and entertain ourselves long into the evening and night. But it's also fundamentally disrupted our relationship with darkness. And darkness, it turns out, is not something we can simply do without. It's not a minor environmental factor. It's essential for sleep. The reason darkness matters so much is because of a hormone called melatonin. Melatonin is often called the sleep hormone, though this is somewhat of a simplification. It's not that melatonin puts you to sleep the way a sleeping pill does. Rather, melatonin signals to your body that it's time to prepare for sleep. Melatonin is produced by a gland called the pineal gland, which sits in the center of your brain. This gland receives signals from your eyes about light levels. When light levels are high, melatonin production is suppressed. When light levels are low, melatonin production increases. This is why melatonin levels naturally rise in the evening as the sun sets. This rising melatonin is part of what makes you feel sleepy as evening progresses. But here's the crucial part. Melatonin is exquisitely sensitive to light. Not just any light, but particularly to blue light, which is the light present in sunlight and also the light emitted by screens. When you're exposed to bright blue light in the evening, your body interprets this as a signal that it's still daytime. Your melatonin production is suppressed. Your body thinks it's still in the active part of the day. So even though the clock says it's 10 at night and you're supposedly getting ready for bed, Your biology is still running in daytime mode. You feel alert. You feel awake. You can't fall asleep because your body genuinely doesn't think it's time to sleep yet. This is where the myth of blue light comes in. You've probably heard that you shouldn't use screens before bed because of blue light. This is partially true, but the truth is more nuanced than the myth suggests. It's not that blue light from screens is inherently harmful. It's that blue light exposure in the evening disrupts your melatonin production, which disrupts your sleep. But this isn't unique to screens. Bright light from any source, a lamp, overhead lights, even a bright room, will suppress melatonin if you're exposed to it in the evening. The reason screens get singled out is partly because they're bright and they emit blue light, but also because we tend to use them close to our faces, and the light from a screen held close to your face is more intense than light from a more distant lamp. The solution to this isn't necessarily to avoid screens entirely, it's to manage your light exposure in the evening. If you're going to use screens, you can reduce the impact by dimming them, by using blue light filters if your device has them, or by using blue light blocking glasses if you want to. But more importantly, you can manage the overall light environment. As evening approaches, dim your lights. Reduce the overall brightness of your environment. Use warmer colored lights, yellows and reds, rather than cool blue-white lights. These warmer lights don't suppress melatonin the way cooler lights do. This is why many people find that using candlelight or firelight in the evening feels more relaxing than using bright overhead lights. It's not just a psychological preference, it's biology. Your body is responding appropriately to these warm, dim lights by beginning to produce melatonin. For the last hour or two before bed, you can essentially create darkness through light management. You don't need to sit in complete darkness. That might not be practical. But you can create a dimly lit environment with warm colors. This allows your melatonin to rise naturally, preparing your body for sleep. When your melatonin is rising, you'll notice that you naturally feel sleepier. Your eyelids feel heavier, your thoughts become slower, your body feels heavier. These aren't signs that something is wrong, these are signs that everything is working correctly. Your body is doing exactly what it should be doing. You're not fighting against your biology. You're flowing with it. The relationship between light and sleep is so powerful that light therapy can be used to shift your circadian rhythm. If you're a morning person who needs to shift your schedule later, getting bright light exposure in the evening will delay your clock. If you're an evening person who needs to shift your schedule earlier, getting bright light exposure in the morning will advance your clock. This is actually how we can help our bodies adjust to jet lag more quickly. By strategically timing light exposure, we can help our internal clocks re-entrain to a new time zone faster than they would naturally. But beyond the light-dark cycle, other environmental factors also matter for sleep. Temperature is one of them. The temperature of your environment and the temperature of your body both influence sleep quality. Most research suggests that a cooler environment, around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, or roughly 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, tends to facilitate sleep for most people. This is because your body temperature naturally drops as you prepare for sleep and throughout the night. A cooler environment supports this natural temperature drop. If your environment is too warm, your body struggles to cool down, and this can disrupt sleep. Conversely, if it's too cold, you might spend energy shivering and trying to stay warm, which also disrupts sleep. But again, this is a general guideline, not a universal rule. Some people sleep better in warmer environments, some people are sensitive to temperature changes, and some are relatively insensitive. The key is to experiment and notice what feels comfortable for you. Your comfort is the important thing. If you sleep better when it's warmer, then it's warmer. If you sleep better when it's cooler, then it's cooler. The goal is not to follow a rule, but to create an environment that supports your sleep. The myth of perfect stillness. There's a persistent image in our minds of what good sleep looks like. A person lying completely still on their back or side, unmoving throughout the night, peaceful and serene. We imagine that the ideal sleeper is the stillest sleeper. That movement during sleep is somehow a sign of poor sleep quality or restlessness. This image has become so embedded in our conception of sleep that many people feel anxious if they move during the night. They feel like they're doing something wrong. They might even try to stay still, which ironically creates tension that makes sleep worse. But this image of perfect stillness is a myth. In reality, healthy sleep involves quite a bit of movement. Throughout the night, you shift positions. You roll from your back to your side. You might curl up in a fetal position for a while, then stretch out. You might move your arms, adjust your pillow, shift your legs. These movements are not signs of poor sleep, they're signs of healthy sleep. They're part of how your body maintains circulation, prevents pressure sores, and ensures that different parts of your body get adequate support. The reason we have this myth of stillness is partly cultural. We've been taught that stillness equals peace, that movement equals agitation. But in sleep, this isn't true. Movement is natural, it's healthy, it's necessary. When you're in light sleep or when you're transitioning between sleep stages, your body naturally moves more. When you're in deep sleep, you move less. But even in deep sleep, you're not completely still. You're making small adjustments. Your body is constantly fine-tuning its position to optimize comfort and circulation. What matters for sleep quality is not whether you move, but whether your movements are serving your sleep or disrupting it. A movement that helps you get more comfortable and allows you to sleep deeper is good. A movement driven by discomfort or anxiety that wakes you up and prevents you from falling back asleep is disruptive. The difference isn't about the movement itself, but about what's causing it. If you're moving because you're uncomfortable, that's a problem that needs to be solved. But if you're moving as part of your natural sleep cycle, that's just sleep being sleep. The research on sleeping position is revealing. There's no single best sleeping position. Different positions have different advantages and disadvantages, and different people have different preferences and needs. Some people sleep best on their back. This position keeps your spine relatively neutral and allows your head to rest on a pillow without excessive neck bending. However, some people find that sleeping on their back causes snoring or makes sleep apnea worse. Some people find that their lower back hurts when they sleep on their back, especially if they don't have proper pillow support under their knees. Other people sleep best on their side. Side sleeping is often recommended for people who snore or have sleep apnea because it keeps the airway more open. It can also be more comfortable for people with lower back pain. However, side sleeping can sometimes create pressure on the shoulder you're lying on, which might cause discomfort over time. Some people find that sleeping on their side causes their lower arm to fall asleep or creates tension in their neck. Still, other people sleep best on their stomach. This position can be comfortable for some people, though it's generally less recommended because it requires you to turn your neck to breathe, which can create neck strain. However, some people genuinely prefer this position and sleep well in it. The best sleeping position is the one in which you sleep best. This might sound circular, but it's actually profound. It means that the best position is individual. It's determined by your body, your comfort, your preferences. If you sleep well on your back, sleep on your back. If you sleep well on your side, sleep on your side. If you sleep well on your stomach, sleep on your stomach. The position matters less than how well you sleep in that position. What does matter more than position is support. Whatever position you sleep in, your body should feel supported. If you sleep on your back, a pillow under your head and another under your knees can help maintain the natural curve of your spine. If you sleep on your side, a pillow that supports your head at the right height, so your neck isn't bent or stretched, is important. A pillow between your knees can help keep your spine aligned. If you sleep on your stomach, you'll want a low pillow under your head, so your neck isn't excessively rotated, and you might want a pillow under your abdomen to maintain spine alignment. The mattress you sleep on also matters for support. A mattress that's too soft might not provide enough support for your spine. A mattress that's too firm might create pressure points. The ideal mattress is one that supports the natural curves of your body while allowing your body to sink in enough to feel comfortable. But again, this is individual. Some people prefer firmer mattresses, some prefer softer ones. The best mattress is the one that supports your sleep. One of the most important things to understand about movement during sleep is that it's not actually something you can control. You can decide what position to fall asleep in, but you can't control what position you'll be in when you wake up. Your body moves during sleep according to its own logic. It makes these movements without your conscious awareness or control. If you try to stay still, if you try to maintain a single position all night, You're essentially fighting against your body's natural sleep movements. You're creating tension. You're preventing your body from doing what it needs to do. And this tension and prevention will actually disrupt your sleep. So the wisdom here is to let your body move. Trust that your body knows what it's doing. When you shift positions, you're not disrupting your sleep. You're supporting it. When you adjust your pillow or your blankets, you're not doing something wrong. You're responding to your body's needs. The goal is not to achieve perfect stillness. The goal is to achieve comfort, to allow your body to rest, to surrender to the natural movements that are part of healthy sleep. The caffeine paradox. Caffeine is one of the most widely consumed substances in the world. Millions of people start their day with a cup of coffee or tea. Many continue consuming caffeine throughout the day. Some have a late afternoon coffee. A few might even have caffeine in the evening. And all of these people, if asked, would probably acknowledge that caffeine affects sleep. They might say, "I can't have coffee after 3 in the afternoon, or I won't sleep." Or, "I'm so sensitive to caffeine that I can't have it after lunch." These statements have become so common that they feel like universal truths. But the reality of how caffeine affects sleep is far more complex and individual than these simple rules suggest. First, let's understand what caffeine actually does. Caffeine is a stimulant. It works by blocking adenosine receptors in your brain. Adenosine is a substance that accumulates throughout the day as you expend mental energy. As adenosine builds up, it creates a signal that you're tired, that you need rest. This is called sleep pressure. Caffeine blocks the receptors that would normally receive this adenosine signal, so even though adenosine is still accumulating, your brain doesn't perceive the signal. You don't feel tired, you feel alert, you feel energized. The key thing to understand about caffeine is that it doesn't actually create energy. It creates the perception of wakefulness by masking the signal of tiredness. Your body is still accumulating fatigue. Your sleep pressure is still building, but you can't feel it because caffeine is blocking the signal. This is why caffeine can be so useful in the morning or afternoon when you need to be alert. But it's also why the timing of caffeine consumption matters for sleep. The half-life of caffeine is approximately 5 to 6 hours. This means that if you consume 100 milligrams of caffeine at noon, by 6 in the evening, you still have 50 milligrams circulating in your bloodstream. By midnight, you might still have some amount circulating, though much less. But here's where individual variation comes in. The half-life of caffeine varies significantly between people. For some people, caffeine is metabolized very quickly. For others, it's metabolized very slowly. This variation is largely determined by genetics. Some people have genetic variations that make them fast metabolizers of caffeine. Others are slow metabolizers. If you're a slow metabolizer, caffeine stays in your system much longer. A coffee you had at 2 in the afternoon might still be significantly affecting your sleep at 10 at night. This is why the blanket rule of no caffeine after 3 in the afternoon works for some people, but not others. If you're a fast metabolizer, you might be able to have coffee at 4 in the afternoon and sleep perfectly well at 10. But if you're a slow metabolizer, you might need to cut off caffeine much earlier in the day. The only way to know your own caffeine sensitivity is to experiment. Pay attention to how much caffeine you're consuming and when, and notice how it affects your sleep. If you can have coffee at 3 and sleep well, then that's fine for you. If you notice that afternoon caffeine disrupts your sleep, then you know you need to cut it off earlier. But the relationship between caffeine and sleep is even more nuanced than just metabolism. The amount of caffeine matters. A small cup of tea has much less caffeine than a large cup of coffee. A single espresso has less caffeine than a double. The source of caffeine also varies. Coffee has more caffeine than tea. Black tea has more than green tea. Even chocolate contains some caffeine. So when we talk about caffeine consumption, we're not just talking about whether you had coffee or not. We're talking about how much total caffeine you've consumed from all sources throughout the day. There's also the paradox of caffeine dependence. If you consume caffeine regularly, your body develops a tolerance to it. Your adenosine receptors adjust. You need more caffeine to achieve the same effect. Additionally, your sleep becomes somewhat adapted to the presence of caffeine. If you regularly consume caffeine throughout the day, your sleep quality might not actually be as disrupted by afternoon caffeine as it would be in someone who rarely consumes caffeine. This is because your body has adjusted. Your sleep has adapted to the presence of caffeine in your system. However, this adaptation has a cost. Regular caffeine consumption might reduce the overall depth of your sleep. You might be sleeping, but not as deeply as you would if you weren't consuming caffeine. You might not realize this because you're adapted to it. But if you were to stop caffeine consumption for a week or two, you might notice that your sleep becomes deeper and more restorative. You might wake up feeling more refreshed. This doesn't mean caffeine is bad. It just means there's a trade-off. You're trading some sleep depth for daytime alertness. One of the interesting things about caffeine is that its effects can be quite subtle. You might not realize that caffeine is affecting your sleep. You might think you're sleeping fine, but your sleep might be less deep than it could be. You might be waking up slightly more often or spending less time in deep sleep. These changes might be subtle enough that you don't consciously notice them, but they can accumulate over time. They can affect how rested you feel, how you function during the day, your mood, your cognitive performance. The wisdom with caffeine is to be intentional about it. If you love coffee and you want to continue drinking it, that's fine. But be aware of how much you're drinking, when you're drinking it, and whether it's affecting your sleep. If you notice that it is, you can experiment with reducing the amount, changing the timing, or switching to lower caffeine beverages. If you notice that it's not affecting your sleep, then enjoy your coffee. There's no need to follow a rule that doesn't apply to you. For people who are sensitive to caffeine and who want to improve their sleep, the most effective strategy is usually to cut off caffeine in the afternoon. Some people find that cutting off caffeine at noon works best. Others can have it until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. The key is to find the cutoff time that allows your sleep to be as deep and restorative as possible. You might also consider that the total amount of caffeine matters more than the timing. If you're having multiple large cups of coffee throughout the day, reducing the total amount might help more than just changing the timing. There's also the question of whether to quit caffeine entirely. For some people, this is the right choice. If you're very sensitive to caffeine, or if you're struggling with sleep and caffeine seems to be a major factor, eliminating it entirely might help. But for others, caffeine is a tool that provides real benefits for daytime alertness and cognitive function. The cost in terms of slightly reduced sleep depth might be worth the benefit of improved daytime function. This is a personal calculation that each person has to make for themselves. The alcohol deception. There's a widespread belief that alcohol helps you sleep. A nightcap before bed, a glass of wine in the evening, a beer to help you relax. These are common practices and the logic seems sound. Alcohol is a depressant. It slows down your central nervous system. It makes you feel relaxed and drowsy. So naturally it should help you sleep, right? But this is one of the most profound deceptions about sleep. While alcohol might help you fall asleep, it significantly disrupts your sleep architecture. It reduces sleep quality, and the effects can be subtle enough that you might not realize what's happening. Here's what happens when you consume alcohol in the evening. Alcohol is absorbed into your bloodstream relatively quickly. It passes through the blood-brain barrier and begins affecting your brain. One of its effects is to enhance the activity of GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. GABA essentially tells neurons to slow down. This is why alcohol makes you feel relaxed and drowsy. This is also why alcohol can help you fall asleep more quickly. If you're lying in bed trying to sleep and you're anxious or your mind is racing, alcohol can quiet that anxiety and racing mind. It can help you transition into sleep more easily. But here's where the disruption begins. As your body metabolizes the alcohol throughout the night, it begins to suppress REM sleep. REM sleep is the stage of sleep characterized by rapid eye movement and vivid dreams. It's the stage where much of your emotional processing happens, where your brain consolidates memories, where creativity and problem-solving are enhanced. When alcohol suppresses REM sleep, you're losing all of these benefits. You're sleeping, but you're sleeping poorly because you're missing out on crucial stages of sleep. Additionally, alcohol disrupts your sleep architecture in other ways. It fragments your sleep. You might fall asleep quickly and sleep deeply for the first few hours. But as your body metabolizes the alcohol, your sleep becomes disrupted. You wake up more frequently. You have arousals, brief moments where your sleep is disrupted even if you don't fully wake up. You spend more time in lighter stages of sleep and less time in deep sleep. The result is that even though you might be in bed for 8 hours, your actual sleep quality is much lower. You wake up in the morning not feeling refreshed. You feel groggy. You might have a headache. You feel tired even though you slept a full night. This is particularly true if you consume a significant amount of alcohol. Small amounts might have minimal effects, but as the amount of alcohol increases, the disruption to sleep increases. Someone who has a single glass of wine might notice minimal sleep disruption. Someone who has 3 or 4 drinks in the evening will definitely notice disrupted sleep. They might not realize it's the alcohol causing it. They might think they just slept poorly. But the alcohol is the culprit. The timing of alcohol consumption also matters. Alcohol consumed closer to bedtime has a more disruptive effect on sleep architecture than alcohol consumed several hours before bed. This is because your body has more time to metabolize the alcohol before you're trying to sleep. If you consume alcohol several hours before bed, by the time you're sleeping, much of it has already been metabolized. But if you consume alcohol right before bed, you're going to sleep while your body is still processing it, and this will disrupt your sleep more significantly. One of the insidious things about alcohol's effect on sleep is that it creates a kind of negative feedback loop. You have trouble sleeping. You have a drink to help you relax and fall asleep. You fall asleep more easily. But your sleep is disrupted by the alcohol. You wake up in the morning not feeling rested. So the next night, you're more tired, more desperate for sleep, so you have another drink. This continues night after night. You become dependent on alcohol to fall asleep. Without it, you feel like you can't sleep. But the alcohol is actually making your sleep worse. You're in a cycle where the thing you're using to solve your sleep problem is actually the thing creating your sleep problem. Breaking this cycle requires understanding what's actually happening. It requires recognizing that even though alcohol helps you fall asleep, it's harming your overall sleep quality. It requires being willing to deal with the initial difficulty of falling asleep without alcohol, knowing that once you've broken the cycle and given your sleep a chance to recover, you'll sleep better than you ever did with alcohol. The research on alcohol and sleep is quite clear. Regular alcohol consumption, particularly in the evening, is associated with poorer sleep quality, more sleep fragmentation, more daytime sleepiness, and more mood problems. It's associated with increased risk of sleep disorders like sleep apnea. For people with insomnia, alcohol can actually make the insomnia worse over time, even though it might seem to help in the short term. If you enjoy alcohol and want to continue consuming it, the best approach is to do so earlier in the day. Alcohol consumed in the afternoon will be largely metabolized by the time you're sleeping. Alcohol consumed in the evening will still be circulating in your system when you're trying to sleep. So if you want to have a drink, have it with lunch or in the early afternoon. This allows your body to metabolize it before you're sleeping. If you want to have a drink in the evening, the ideal is to have it several hours before bed, giving your body time to process it. But having a drink right before bed is almost guaranteed to disrupt your sleep. For people who are struggling with sleep and who are currently using alcohol as a sleep aid, the recommendation is to gradually reduce your alcohol consumption, particularly in the evening. Don't go cold turkey necessarily, as this can create withdrawal symptoms, but gradually reduce the amount and the frequency. Give your sleep a chance to adjust. After a week or 2 without evening alcohol, you might notice that your sleep actually improves. You might wake up feeling more rested. You might feel less groggy in the morning. Once you experience this improved sleep quality, you'll understand why reducing alcohol is worth it, even if the initial transition is uncomfortable. Exercise timing and the evening myth. There's a widespread belief that you shouldn't exercise in the evening because exercise will keep you awake and prevent you from sleeping. This belief is so common that many people structure their exercise routines around it. They avoid evening workouts. They make sure to exercise in the morning or afternoon so that they won't disrupt their sleep. But like many myths about sleep, this one is based on a misunderstanding of the actual science. The truth about exercise and sleep is more nuanced and actually quite encouraging. First, let's be clear. Exercise is one of the most powerful tools we have for improving sleep quality. People who exercise regularly sleep better than people who don't exercise. They fall asleep faster. They sleep more deeply. They have fewer arousals during the night. They wake up feeling more rested. Exercise improves sleep quality across the board. This is not in question. The only question is about timing. The myth about evening exercise comes from the fact that exercise is stimulating. When you exercise, your heart rate increases. Your body temperature rises. Your adrenaline is elevated. Your cortisol is elevated. Your sympathetic nervous system is activated. These are all things that make you alert and awake. So the logic is, if I exercise in the evening, I'll be stimulated and alert right when I'm trying to wind down and sleep. This seems reasonable, but the actual research shows something different. Studies on the timing of exercise and sleep have found that exercise in the evening doesn't necessarily disrupt sleep. In fact, some studies have found that evening exercise can actually improve sleep quality. The key factor is not the timing of exercise, but the intensity and the duration. Intense exercise very close to bedtime, within an hour or two, can disrupt sleep for some people because your body is still activated. But moderate exercise in the evening, completed several hours before bed, doesn't disrupt sleep, and in some cases it improves it. This is because exercise has multiple effects on sleep. Yes, immediately after exercise you're stimulated and activated, but over the hours following exercise, your body begins to recover. Your heart rate comes down. Your body temperature comes down. Your nervous system shifts from sympathetic activation toward parasympathetic activation. You become more relaxed. Additionally, exercise increases your sleep pressure. It increases the amount of adenosine in your system. It increases your body's drive to sleep. So even though you're stimulated immediately after exercise, a few hours later, you have more drive to sleep and your body is more relaxed. The research suggests that the ideal timing for evening exercise is to complete it at least 3 to 4 hours before bed. This gives your body time to recover from the stimulation while still maintaining the increased sleep drive that exercise creates. So you could exercise at 5 or 6 in the evening, have dinner, do some relaxing activities, and then go to bed at 9 or 10, and your sleep would likely be better than if you hadn't exercised. For people who have limited time and can only exercise in the evening, this is good news. You don't have to choose between exercising and sleeping well. You can do both. You just need to make sure that you're completing your exercise several hours before bed, not right before bed. If you're exercising at 8 in the evening and trying to sleep at 8:30, yes, that might disrupt your sleep. But if you're exercising at 5 or 6 and sleeping at 9 or 10, it shouldn't. The type of exercise also matters somewhat. Intense, vigorous exercise might require more recovery time than moderate exercise. If you're doing high-intensity interval training, you might want to complete it earlier in the evening than if you're doing a moderate-intensity walk. But even intense exercise isn't necessarily incompatible with good sleep, as long as there's enough time between the exercise and sleep. There's also something interesting about the relationship between exercise and sleep quality. People who exercise regularly often find that their sleep becomes more efficient. They might sleep slightly less but feel more rested because their sleep is deeper and more restorative. They also find that the effects of caffeine on their sleep become less pronounced because exercise is creating such strong sleep pressure that it overrides the stimulating effects of caffeine. This doesn't mean you should use exercise as an excuse to consume excessive caffeine, but it does mean that regular exercisers often have more flexibility with caffeine timing than non-exercisers. Another interesting finding is that the type of exercise matters for sleep quality. Aerobic exercise, running, cycling, swimming, dancing, is particularly effective for improving sleep. Strength training also improves sleep. But the combination of aerobic exercise and strength training seems to be optimal. People who do both aerobic exercise and strength training tend to have the best sleep quality. The duration of exercise also matters, but more is not always better. Research suggests that around 30 to 60 minutes of moderate intensity exercise is optimal for sleep improvement. More than that might not provide additional sleep benefits, and in some cases excessive exercise without adequate recovery might actually disrupt sleep. So the wisdom here is to exercise regularly, but don't be afraid of evening exercise. If you can exercise in the morning or afternoon, that's fine, but if you can only exercise in the evening, that's also fine. Just make sure you're completing your exercise several hours before bed, and you're likely to find that your sleep improves. The sleep benefits of regular exercise far outweigh any potential disruption from the timing of that exercise. The screen light controversy. In recent years, there's been an explosion of concern about screens and sleep. Blue light from phones, tablets, and computers is blamed for disrupting sleep. Parents are told not to let their children use screens before bed. Adults are advised to put away their devices at least an hour before sleep. The blue light is the culprit, we're told. It suppresses melatonin. It keeps you awake. You need to avoid screens in the evening if you want to sleep well. But like many of the myths we've been exploring, this one is based on a kernel of truth that's been exaggerated and oversimplified. Yes, blue light from screens can affect melatonin production. Yes, using screens very close to bedtime can disrupt sleep for some people. But the effect is more complex than the myth suggests. And for many people, it's not the primary culprit behind sleep disruption. First, let's talk about what the research actually shows. Studies on blue light and melatonin have found that bright blue light exposure does suppress melatonin production. This is true, but the intensity of the light matters. A bright screen held very close to your face has more effect than a dimmed screen held further away. Additionally, the duration of exposure matters. 15 minutes of screen time might have minimal effects. 2 hours of screen time has more effect. The timing also matters. Blue light exposure very close to bedtime has more effect than blue light exposure earlier in the evening. But here's the crucial finding from research. Blue light is not the only factor that affects sleep when using screens. In fact, it might not even be the primary factor for many people. The content you're consuming on the screen matters. If you're watching something stressful or engaging, your brain is becoming activated regardless of the light. If you're reading something that's causing you to think deeply or emotionally, your brain is activated. If you're checking work emails or scrolling through social media and feeling stressed or anxious, your nervous system is activated. This activation disrupts sleep regardless of the light. Additionally, the posture and behavior associated with screen use can disrupt sleep. You're often lying in bed using screens, which creates a mental association between bed and wakefulness. You're often using screens while your mind is engaged with something other than sleep. You're not winding down. You're activating your mind. This is disruptive to sleep, and it has nothing to do with blue light. One study that's revealing is the one that looked at people using screens with and without blue light filters. The researchers found that blue light filters had minimal effect on sleep quality. People using screens with blue light filters still had disrupted sleep compared to people not using screens. This suggests that blue light is not the primary factor. The primary factors are the content, the mental activation, and the behavioral patterns associated with screen use. So the myth of blue light is not that blue light doesn't affect melatonin, it does. The myth is that blue light is the main problem with screens and sleep. It's not. The main problems are the mental activation and the behavioral patterns. If you want to use screens in the evening without disrupting your sleep, here's what actually matters. First, use screens for content that's not mentally activating. Reading a calming article or looking at gentle images is fine. Watching something stressful or engaging is not. Second, keep the screen dimmed. A bright screen will have more effect than a dimmed screen. Third, don't use screens in bed. Use them in another room, so you're not creating an association between bed and wakefulness. Fourth, stop using screens 30 minutes to an hour before bed, giving your mind time to wind down. But this is not because of blue light. It's because your mind needs time to transition from active engagement to sleep readiness. If you follow these guidelines, you can use screens in the evening without disrupting your sleep. You don't need special blue light glasses. You don't need to eliminate screens entirely. You just need to be mindful of how you're using them. For people who are very sensitive to light, or who have tried everything else and are still having sleep problems, blue light glasses might help. These glasses filter out blue light, reducing the amount of blue light reaching your eyes. Some people find that they help, but they're not a magic solution. They're a tool that might help some people in some situations. The broader point is that the screen light controversy has distracted us from more important factors affecting sleep. Yes, light exposure matters, but so do many other things. The content you're consuming, your stress level, your anxiety, your sleep schedule, your exercise, your caffeine consumption, your alcohol consumption. Focusing obsessively on blue light while ignoring these other factors is like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. You're addressing a minor issue while ignoring the major ones. The temperature truth. Your body has a sophisticated system for regulating its temperature. This system is constantly working, making tiny adjustments to maintain your core body temperature at approximately 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. But here's something fascinating. Your body temperature is not constant throughout the day. It fluctuates. It's highest in the late afternoon and early evening. It's lowest in the early morning, a few hours before you naturally wake up. This daily fluctuation in body temperature is part of your circadian rhythm. It's controlled by the same master clock that controls your sleep-wake cycle. What's particularly interesting is that the drop in body temperature in the evening is one of the signals that triggers sleep. As your body temperature drops, you start to feel sleepy. This is one of the reasons why a warm bath or shower in the evening can help you sleep better. When you get out of the warm water, your body temperature drops more rapidly than it would have naturally. This accelerated drop in temperature can trigger sleepiness. It's not the warmth of the bath that helps you sleep. It's the subsequent cooling that does. This is also why a cool environment tends to facilitate sleep. Your body is trying to cool down as part of the process of falling asleep and staying asleep. If your environment is too warm, your body has to work harder to cool down. It has to use energy to dissipate heat. This creates activation rather than relaxation. A cooler environment allows your body to cool down more easily, which facilitates sleep. This is why most sleep research suggests that a bedroom temperature around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit is optimal for most people. But again, this is a general guideline, not a universal rule. Individual variation in temperature preference is significant. Some people genuinely sleep better in a warmer environment. Some people are very sensitive to temperature changes. Some are relatively insensitive. Additionally, age matters. Older adults sometimes have more difficulty regulating their body temperature and might prefer warmer environments. Women going through menopause might experience temperature fluctuations that make finding a comfortable temperature challenging. These are all individual variations that matter. The key is to find the temperature that feels comfortable to you and that allows you to sleep well. If you sleep better when it's warmer, then it's warmer. If you sleep better when it's cooler, then it's cooler. The ideal temperature is the one that works for you. You can experiment to find it. Try different temperatures for a few nights and notice how well you sleep. Pay attention to whether you're waking up because you're too hot or too cold. Adjust accordingly. Beyond room temperature, the temperature of your bedding also matters. Some people prefer heavy, warm blankets. Others prefer light blankets. Some prefer no blankets at all, just a sheet. Some like the feeling of being wrapped up. Others feel claustrophobic. The goal is to find bedding that allows you to maintain a comfortable body temperature throughout the night. If you're waking up too hot, you might need lighter bedding or fewer blankets. If you're waking up too cold, you might need heavier bedding or more blankets. There's also the question of the temperature of your body itself, not just your environment. Your core body temperature drops as you fall asleep and throughout the night. But your skin temperature actually increases slightly. This is because your blood vessels dilate, allowing more blood to flow to your skin, which allows heat to dissipate. This is why your hands and feet often feel warm when you're falling asleep. This warming of your extremities is actually a sign that your body is preparing for sleep. Some people find that warming their hands and feet before bed helps them fall asleep more easily. This might be why foot baths or warm socks before bed can help with sleep. Warming your extremities triggers the blood vessel dilation that's part of the sleep preparation process. But again, this is individual. Some people find this helpful. Others don't notice any effect. The relationship between temperature and sleep quality is real, but it's often overemphasized compared to other factors. Temperature matters, but it's not the primary determinant of sleep quality for most people. If you're struggling with sleep, temperature might be a factor worth adjusting. But it's probably not the only factor and might not even be the main factor. Look at the bigger picture: your sleep schedule, your stress level, your exercise, your caffeine and alcohol consumption, your light exposure. Temperature is one piece of a larger puzzle. The power of acceptance. There's a paradox at the heart of sleep that often goes unrecognized. The harder you try to sleep, the worse your sleep becomes. This is true for everyone, but it's especially true for people with insomnia. They lie in bed, desperately wanting to fall asleep, anxious about whether they'll be able to sleep, monitoring their sleep, checking the clock to see how much sleep they're getting. This anxiety and effort actually prevents sleep. The very thing they're doing to try to solve their sleep problem is making it worse. This paradox is sometimes called performance anxiety in sleep. You're performing, you're trying, you're efforting. But sleep is not something that can be forced through effort. Sleep is something that happens when you stop trying and allow it to happen. It's a passive process, not an active one. The moment you try to make it happen, you've lost it. One of the most effective approaches to insomnia that modern sleep science has developed is called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI. One of the key components of CBTI is acceptance. Instead of fighting against wakefulness, you accept it. Instead of trying to force sleep, you stop trying. Instead of lying in bed anxious about not sleeping, you get out of bed and do something relaxing in another room until you feel sleepy. Then you go back to bed. This approach works because it breaks the cycle of anxiety and effort that perpetuates insomnia. When you stop trying, when you stop monitoring your sleep, when you stop checking the clock, the anxiety diminishes. And when the anxiety diminishes, sleep becomes possible again. It's counterintuitive, but it works. The philosophy of acceptance extends beyond just the moment of trying to fall asleep. It extends to the broader perspective on sleep itself. If you have a night where you don't sleep well, acceptance means acknowledging that you didn't sleep well, accepting it, and moving on. It doesn't mean spiraling into worry about what this means for your health, or trying to compensate by sleeping extra the next night, or being angry at yourself for not sleeping better. It means simply accepting that it happened and trusting that your body will recover. Research on sleep debt and recovery is interesting. If you have one night of poor sleep, it doesn't significantly harm your health or cognitive function. Your body is resilient. One night of poor sleep is something you can recover from. Even a few nights of poor sleep, while uncomfortable, doesn't cause lasting damage. Your body will recover once you get back to sleeping well. The problem comes when you let the anxiety about poor sleep perpetuate the poor sleep. When you have one bad night and then spend the next several nights anxious about repeating that bad night, you create a cycle of poor sleep that lasts much longer than it needs to. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up or not trying to improve your sleep. It means trying to improve your sleep by addressing the factors within your control, your schedule, your environment, your exercise, your caffeine and alcohol consumption, while accepting the factors outside your control and accepting that sometimes sleep will be good and sometimes it will be less good, and that's okay. One of the interesting discoveries from sleep research is that people who worry less about sleep tend to sleep better. This is not because worry doesn't matter, it's because worry itself is disruptive to sleep. So the path to better sleep often involves worrying less about sleep. It involves trusting your body. It involves accepting that you're not in complete control of sleep, and that's okay. Your body knows how to sleep. You don't have to make it happen. You just have to get out of your own way. This is where the concept of letting sleep happen becomes important. Sleep is not something you do. It's something that happens to you when you create the right conditions and then release your grip on trying to control it. The conditions you can control: your sleep schedule, your environment, your light exposure, your exercise, your caffeine and alcohol consumption, your stress management. Once you've optimized these conditions, the next step is to release, to let go, to trust that sleep will come. For people with chronic insomnia, this release can be difficult. The insomnia has created a learned anxiety around sleep. The bed has become associated with wakefulness and anxiety rather than sleep. The process of recovery from chronic insomnia often involves gradually rebuilding this association. This might involve spending less time in bed, only going to bed when you're truly sleepy, getting out of bed if you're awake for more than 20 minutes, and gradually expanding the time you spend in bed as your sleep improves. The power of acceptance also extends to accepting your individual sleep needs. If you naturally need 9 hours of sleep, and you're in a situation where you can only get 8, accept that you're going to be slightly tired. Don't fight it. Don't stress about it. Just accept it and do the best you can. If you naturally wake up early and you have a schedule that requires you to sleep later, accept that this is difficult for you and make whatever accommodations you can. But don't torture yourself about it. Don't create additional stress by being angry at yourself for not fitting into a schedule that doesn't match your biology. Your personal sleep blueprint. We've journeyed together through 5 myths about sleep and the scientific truth behind them. We've explored the 8-hour illusion and discovered that sleep needs vary widely between individuals. We've learned about your circadian rhythm and how your internal clock shapes your sleep-wake patterns in ways unique to you. We've understood the role of light and darkness in triggering melatonin production and facilitating sleep. We've discovered that movement during sleep is natural and healthy, not a sign of poor sleep. We've explored the complex relationship between caffeine and sleep, understanding that timing and individual metabolism matter more than blanket rules. We've learned that alcohol, despite feeling relaxing, disrupts sleep architecture and reduces sleep quality. We've debunked the myth that evening exercise prevents sleep, finding instead that it can enhance sleep quality. We've moved beyond the blue light controversy to understand that mental activation and behavioral patterns matter more than light wavelength. We've explored the relationship between temperature and sleep, finding that while temperature matters, individual preference is paramount. And we've discovered the paradoxical power of acceptance, understanding that releasing the struggle for sleep often leads to better sleep. Now, as we reach the conclusion of this exploration, the real work begins. Because understanding these myths and the science behind them is only the first step. The second step is integrating this knowledge into your own life, creating your own personal sleep blueprint that honors your individual biology, your unique needs, and your specific circumstances. Your personal sleep blueprint is not something that should be imposed on you by an article or a video or a book. It's something you create through observation, experimentation, and self-compassion. It begins with understanding yourself. When do you naturally feel sleepy? What time do you naturally wake without an alarm? How much sleep do you genuinely need to feel rested? Are you a morning person or an evening person? What environmental factors make the biggest difference in your sleep quality? What disrupts your sleep most significantly? These questions require honest self-observation. They might require keeping a sleep journal for a week or two, noting your sleep times, your sleep quality, any factors that seem to affect your sleep. But this observation is valuable. It gives you data about your own patterns. It shows you what matters most for your sleep. It reveals your individual sleep blueprint. Once you understand yourself, you can make informed decisions about your sleep. You can stop following generic rules and start following your own body's signals. You can experiment with adjustments and notice their effects. You can create a sleep environment and routine that genuinely works for you. Not because it works for someone else, but because it works for you. Remember that your sleep blueprint is not static. It changes with age, with life circumstances, with stress levels, with health changes. What worked for your sleep at 20 might not work at 40. What works during a calm period of life might not work during a stressful period. Your blueprint is something you revisit and adjust as needed. It's a living document, not a fixed rule. As you create your personal sleep blueprint, remember the principles we've explored. Remember that the 8-hour rule is a guideline, not a law. Remember that your circadian rhythm is real and powerful, and working with it rather than against it makes sleep easier. Remember that light in the evening disrupts melatonin, but this doesn't mean you need to live in darkness. Remember that movement during sleep is natural. Remember that caffeine and alcohol affect people differently, and your individual sensitivity matters. Remember that exercise improves sleep, and evening exercise is fine if timed appropriately. Remember that screens matter less for their light and more for their mental activation. Remember that temperature matters, but your comfort is more important than following a rule. And remember that acceptance, releasing the struggle for sleep, is often more powerful than effort. I'd like to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Your perspective matters, and I'd love to understand who is on this journey with me. As you move forward from here, you have tools, You have understanding, you have knowledge. You have the ability to observe yourself, to experiment, to create a sleep situation that genuinely works for you. You have permission to stop following rules that don't serve you. You have permission to honor your individual biology. You have permission to sleep in a way that makes sense for you, not for someone else. Thank you for joining me on this journey through sleep science and rest. Thank you for your time, your attention, your willingness to explore and question and learn. If this exploration has brought you clarity, if it has helped you feel less anxious about your sleep, if it has helped you understand yourself better, I deeply appreciate a like and a subscription to Relaxing Science. Your engagement helps us create more content that explores the fascinating intersection of science and tranquility, knowledge and calm. Also, please let us know in the comments if you'd like to see more content like this. Would you like us to explore other aspects of sleep science? Would you like us to investigate other myths in health and wellness? Would you like us to go deeper into any of the topics we've discussed? Your feedback shapes the content we create. Your voice matters. As you return to your daily life, carry with you the understanding that your sleep is uniquely yours. Your body is wise. Your rhythms are real. Your needs are valid. Trust yourself. Observe yourself. Honor yourself. Create a sleep life that reflects who you are, not who you think you should be. And in doing this, you'll find not just better sleep, but a deeper respect for your own biology, your own nature, your own self. Sleep well, rest deeply, and know that the science is on your side. Your body wants to sleep. Your brain wants to rest. Your biology is designed for sleep. You're not fighting against nature, you're honoring it. And in honoring it, you honor yourself. Thank you once more for this time together. Until we meet again in another exploration of science and rest, take care of yourself. Sleep well. Total.